Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of The Brutal Truth about Sales and Selling Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about how do you keep the momentum in a deal going when there's large time gaps in between points of contact. This is a problem that we face in the complex sale because unlike the simple sale where they either buy or they don't, in the complex sale, there's all these touch points and a lot of time in between them. How do we put a little milestone there, a little momentum, a little who's your sales rep into that process so that the deal doesn't die on the vine, that it doesn't get lost in the noise? This is a classic problem within the complex sale where we feel like people are ghosting us, not paying attention to us because they're not. They've got their own job to do. But approvals take time. Getting in front of other people take time. Budgeting takes time. So we can't hound people, but we do have to have milestones. So I want to talk to my buddy Tom today. Tom and I met on LinkedIn. He was a commenter on some of my videos. We got to know each other. And I said, hey, let's get on the podcast. Let's talk about your sale. So he's got a very complex sale, very long-term sale that's highly competitive. And it touches along several people within the organization. So we're going to walk through his sale and how does he keep momentum going during these long time gaps. I think this is something that we all face and we all have to build into our model, into our game. Instead of just the checking in, how you doing, touching base, following up, that doesn't bring any value to our customer. So guess what? They don't respond to it. We'll get into it. But before we do, I want to make sure you're checking out Co-Video. Co-Video is the way to cut through the noise today. It is the way to get people's attention, to personalize your email because you can't spam video. You can, but nobody will watch it. When you personalize the video, you get that connection. The rapport starts immediately. It's not just text. They see your pretty handsome face with that big smile of yours, the sincerity. And even when you goof it up, trust me, you've seen my videos, people like that. You become humble. You become organic and natural. Check out their YouTube channel, Co-Video, COVIDEO.com, and just tell them Brian Burns sent you from The Brutal Truth. They love The Brutal Truth. Also, make sure you're checking out Emma, the office diva, also known as the office dog. She's my favorite the favorite person on Instagram. Emma's this beautiful golden retriever. It just warms my heart. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end and give you an update on the courses. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. This is really a tremendous experience and opportunity. I really appreciate it. I've been in sales and marketing for over close to 35 years now. We started in full service marketing and slowly started narrowing down to the world of sales incentives and employee recognition. Primarily because there was a tremendous amount of, I'll call it integrity, and not to just put anything else down, but we put together a marketing program. You kind of hope it has a result. When it comes to sales incentives in particular, it has to produce a result, or we don't make any money. We don't get paid. We don't certainly do any more work. So there's a very direct connection between sales incentives, results, and being productive and successful in that world. So within that world, it's always been a very interesting mix of all kinds of industries, all types of companies, different size organizations. So that's been a wonderful creative experience, always learning about something new and addressing different business needs depending on where they are in their product life cycle, industry, et cetera. So that's a real short version of what my background is, and we can certainly go from there.
Okay. And like when you get a new opportunity, do you get leads or is it totally outbound or is it a mix?
For where I am now, it is a mix. We have outbound activity as far as trying to find those people where the stars are aligning. They have budget, they have a need, they don't have a current vendor, they're towards the end of a contract. So as you can imagine, finding those people is really, that's it's not a simple thing. But of course, after you spend a lot of time in this industry, as anybody in sales does, you also have your contacts. You kind of know where the activity is. So you're just making sure you're staying visible, So when those stars align, you're top of mind. And because it's a long sales cycle, that is a majority of those situations. You just happen to hit it at the right time. And that only happens because you have so much activity going on that those opportunities come up on a regular basis.
And so the triggers are a contract expiring or dissatisfaction, or what's the typical trigger event?
Well, I would say that the majority of the time is that the companies have a requirement to bid out programs periodically. So while, as we all know in sales, you get an RFP, you win the business, you will probably have that for at least one more cycle. But at some point, the upper management saying, listen, we just got to make sure that we're still getting a good deal here. Are we getting the best of the services available, et cetera. So that would say, the open RFP, because a cycle has come around, is a good chunk of it. The other is there is dissatisfaction, and companies that they make a promise and then all of a sudden they're more difficult to work with than they thought. They're not as flexible as they thought. The award side is not as the value proposition isn't quite there, so they say, well, we really need to do something better. And then sometimes it's the company that has never really thought about it before. They've thought about sales incentives. They think their salary and comp plan is sufficient, but they start hearing about this in the marketplace that these great trips or merchandise programs or whatever they're doing. They say, wow, that sounds like a lot of fun. So then they tire kick. They're exploring, does this really make a incremental difference in our performance with our team or not? And then that's where we have a more in-depth conversation. The experienced buyer, they kind of know what the value is. They understand what the value is. They're just trying to find out, can you do a better job than my current vendor? So those are the basic categories that we end up in.
And who's typically involved? Is it, I'm sure, whoever leads sales, maybe sales operations?
Well, it's an interesting question because it is very dependent on the size and scope of the organization. So we are very fortunate with our company that we just are starting conversations on program planning for a very large global opportunity. And this one started with nobody who was the owner of the business challenge. It was the purchasing side of the company that someone was assigned to go out into the marketplace, find out who's out there. Let's go through all these presentations, see who you think is the right vendor for the project based on capabilities. And now we're finally going to be speaking to the people who actually own the challenge.
Yeah.
Because it's a large organization. It's almost 100,000 employees, and as I said, it's global. But we'll go all the way down to the other end of the spectrum where, because of the size of the organization, we're speaking directly to the VP of sales or the president because they own the issue and it's small enough. They say, I want to meet with these people. I want to know what your capabilities are. I want to ask the tough questions. So it really is, it's an interesting mix, so it's everything from someone who's been assigned to find a vendor to the person who owns the problem, who wants to meet directly with suppliers and find out, what do you have to offer that's convincing me that this is a good investment?
Well, let's take the bigger case, because that's probably the toughest. Because they're assigning somebody to kind of be the coordinator of that. That right. Person, yeah. And the gatekeeper, right? They're protecting the real, people call it decision makers, but people who are really going to decide.
Yeah, that's I used to work with electronics manufacturer a number of years ago, and the way they would buy is always through the marketing services group. You never ever met with the program owner, the brand itself, or the product line within that company. And the way they would go about this was, and this I have to share this one because this is the craziest sales situation I've ever been in. And Brian, I'm curious if you've ever had this happen. They actually brought in 5 different vendors in the same room at the same time to ask your questions on what you need to know to write your response to the RFP. So no one knew this was how this was going to happen. So we all sat down in the room and everyone was looking at each other and said, oh, boy, I recognize all these people. They're all my competitors. And then they stand in the front of the room and say, okay, we just want to give you all an opportunity to ask any questions you want for the RFP. God. Brian, what kind of questions you're going to ask? Like, when is it due? Do you want it in English? Is it paper or electronic? You're not going to ask pointed questions because that's your stock in trade. Yeah. That's how you show your difference, that you're a deep thinker. You understand what their challenges are. So you're not in any way going to ask those really interesting questions in front of everyone else who would say, wow, I never would have thought of asking that question. That was really smart.
Yeah, obviously, it's a good opportunity. Someone's in market, actively going to select someone.
Right.
I used to call that the beauty contest sale, and
right.
I've never been in the simultaneous in the same room at the same time. But typically, they'd assign it. Not in my space, it wasn't to procurement, but it was to like some low level person to go do a market survey. They do a Google search, they pick the top 5 or 7. Then they either, send out something, RFI, request for information type thing. And then they'd have you in. And you knew it was a beauty contest because you'd be in the lobby and you see the company names that you compete against in the sign-in sheet.
Right.
And you'd be like, and you could tell, by the order of them, kind of their level of interest, what they've already heard. And how did you handle those types of things to kind of differentiate yourself or displace your competitor?
Well, I think, and as I'm sure you have experienced, anyone in the audience who's gone through the long sales cycle, approach, and as you said, the beauty contest, you just have to accept this is the way it is. You can't get around it. You're not going to jump over top of it. The only way that's ever going to happen is you happen to play golf with the CEO, and they say, okay, just go through the process, and we'll have you in later or whatever. But the reality is they need to understand the marketplace and who the vendors are, and there's few shortcuts for them either. So I think going in sympathetic to their situation, that they say they really don't know what all the different vendors have to offer. So you're saying, okay, now I need to understand, so who is it that I'm speaking to? Because if you're talking to someone who has deep knowledge of the services that they're buying, that's a different conversation. If they're just trying to say, how's the chemistry? How's your reputation? What kind of companies do you work with? Do you work with companies like us? Have you had this kind of a challenge before? That's a different level of conversation, but it's still perfectly legitimate because of the person who's standing in front of you. And I think we can't try to talk past them, and we can't talk under them. We have to talk directly to their concerns and their interests, because at this moment in time at the beauty contest, the only thing I'm trying to accomplish is to say, you can be comfortable with us. We'll get the job done. Here's the basic requirements. You're looking at it right now. Please let us move on to the next step. Because eventually you're going to get that opportunity to tell the deeper story and the more technical expertise, et cetera. But you just have to accept who you're talking to at the time and speak to them at the level they want to be spoken to and get them comfortable with what they need to hear.
Yeah, I agree with you. What was the next step? Was it a presentation?
Yes, and to your point, usually the RFI is what got you to the beauty contest. They say, are you basically capable before we waste our time to bring you in? Because everyone's time is tight. No one is trying to figure out a way to fill up their day. That is not a problem. So if you've been invited in, it's usually as a result of an RFI, or they've done their own research and they know categorically that you're an industry leader or whatever. So, okay, so now we've gone through that. Now is the more detailed RFP process, where they're going to say, okay, now here's the particular specs of the program. We want you to respond to this. Very often there is an opportunity to now speak to the who owns that business challenge and clarify points, et cetera. But again, if this is going to be one of those multiple steps, because it would go from RFI, beauty contest, RFP, and now you have the chance to present in person, and then you're among the finalists. So following that continuum along, the RFP is now we have a chance to really dig into our deeper capabilities as they relate specifically to their industry. And the RFP, for me, the way we would write those is, remember that we're going to have to physically present what we're talking about here and then add extra details. So be careful about how it's laid out, that it's not too wonky as far as doesn't dig too far into the weeds, because we're going to need to speak this presentation, if this goes well, at the next phase when we get to meet in person the more senior people.
And how do you do that? I mean, what has worked well and what hasn't?
Well, the interesting thing, or the challenge, I would say, and I'm curious about your own experience with this, and many of us have had this, that the RFP is a little bit of a dance, because when you start going through it, you'll get the sense right away, did their current vendor or past vendor write that? Or did somebody who owns the program write that? Or did a purchasing person write that? So here comes the dance, and you're reading through it and you're waiting for them to see that great question that fits great with your expertise in the industry. And you're reading, you're flipping, you get to the bottom of the RFP, and you're like, I still haven't seen that question. So how do we bring this into this document, or in a way that's going to make sense, that lets us shine with our strongest suit? And sometimes you don't see that in the RFP. So you have to find creative ways to make sure you get a chance. It's almost like, you see some political interview, and the question's asked, and they're answering a completely different question because there's a point they need to make. And so this happens in the RFP process as well, in particular when purchasing is driving it. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I kind of call this like the technical sale, where you're matching requirements with your capabilities. And I'm curious, how do you do that? Is there some kind of demo? Is there some kind of evaluation, proof of concept, customer visit?
Well, for us in this particular industry, technology is really driving a lot of the purchase decisions. So what we strongly push for is the opportunity to demo our technology, to show them how the platform works, because that's the experience both the user is going to have and they are going to have as an administrator. So we want to show them the tools. Here's what it's almost like, put it this way, for the auto business, if someone gets you to sit yourself in a car and take a test drive, you're 70% there to a sale. That's the stats, the last stats that I heard on this. It's somewhat similar to our industry, that if I can have you sit through a demo and show you the technology, this is how you navigate the site. Here's all the tools. Here's the communication tools. Here's all the reporting you're going to get, 24/7 availability. Here's all the huge award selection we now have that delivers in 200 countries around the world. You start doing that and you get that same feeling, almost like a test drive. I'm starting to feel like, oh, well, this is mine. And to your point, one of the keys you do, if we can brand that with their name on the front page and throughout the site, put logos that are theirs, now it's starting to feel like theirs. They're saying, oh, I kind of like the way that looks. I have a sense of ownership already. I haven't even made the purchase yet. So if you can integrate their business issues into that presentation, and they start seeing their issues being addressed in a very specific way, and even looks like their site or mirrors their site to some degree, that's that quote unquote test drive feel that we move ourselves a lot further along in the decision-making process so we can get them to see a demo.
Yeah, that transfer of ownership taking place, that seeing themselves in the future using it, seeing the how it would feel, that benefit. Now, what happens after that?
Well, after that, what has probably happened in most cases, we've done our demo, someone else has done their demo, and they're going to probably end up with, say, two that they want to say, okay, now we want to have the one final really deep dive into, so why do you guys think you're going to be a great fit for us? So now we're past the technology. They've said, we get it. Great technology, super fit, whatever. And now is when you're going to finally hear, okay, we really love our current vendor, or we were really unhappy with my current vendor, or whatever those reasons are, why are they really looking? Because the one thing I will say, and I had this happen in a sales opportunity not all that long ago, and what I encourage people to ask, we have to be bold at this point, because we have to ask that question. What is it that what additional business issue you're trying to solve that is getting you to move away from a current vendor or someone else you already know? If that's the situation, they need to answer that question directly. Because I had this situation happen not long ago where someone said it wasn't until the very end they finally articulated this issue that they didn't want to have this, this surprise bill later into the program. This was going to be for a large travel event. And a previous supplier, after the event had already been scheduled, planned, the whole thing, then suddenly some new bills started coming and they got totally blindsided. They were very upset, added a lot of money to their budget they weren't expecting, but they were stuck. The trip was already in the process of being finalized and planned and everything else. But we had to get them to articulate that so that we could respond to it. So you can imagine, if you don't ask that tough question in that moment, and you walk out of there and you've never spoken it because you don't know that's an issue, and you've walked out of the room and you've never addressed it, and someone else possibly did, you are at a significant disadvantage to ever close that deal. You have to be willing to hear that tough question or that tough issue, because if you can't address it, you're not going to close the deal anyway.
Yeah, if you get them talking about the pain, then you can kind of dig into that and get them on your side.
Right, exactly.
And do a lot of people just kind of have you come in as a plan B if they're happy with the vendor, but they just want a backup one just in case?
Well, and this is where we have to be very deft in this world of sales, because you don't want to blow up relationships or opportunities or new introductions. We don't want to do that, but we also want to have an honest assessment. Why are we really here?
Yeah.
And we do, if we know from industry, inside information or even just well-known information, that a particular company has been working with the same vendor for 20 years, 25 years, and there are those situations out there, that there's no doubt about it. We ask, before we get into the RFP and before we come in, we ask them that question directly. We know you've been working with X for a lot of years. Why are you unsatisfied? What are you trying to achieve? What is it that you're missing that you're not getting right now? And sometimes they'll be direct and honest about it. Sometimes they'll dance around it. And the more they're dancing, the more you realize what's happening is they're just pushing us. They're using us to push the current vendor.
Yeah.
They're using our capability to say, well, guys, listen, we like you, but we're hearing this is available in the industry and at this price. So listen, if you can't do that, then, we may make a change. So we just have to be honest with ourselves and in sales in general. How real is this opportunity? And if we don't ask those questions, the tough questions early on, we can end up going down that road quite a while at using a lot of our internal capabilities, our time, our effort, resources, to just all we're really doing is keeping their current vendor honest. And that's not a good use of our time.
No. Now, let's say the demo goes well. What typically happens after that?
After the demo, the larger the company, the more complex the sale, the more things that your person is also managing, we have to be prepared for, and you had a great video on this about ghosting, that all of a sudden things go quiet. And your job before you got to that point, the job of the salesperson is get to know your buyer as best as you can, understand their world as best as you can. In the deal that we just closed, I had a lot of good conversations with my buyer to understand this individual was under tremendous pressure to get a whole lot of other contracts moving, as well as year-end planning. And there's a whole bunch of other things that were all on their plate. So I knew that when the final, when we're hearing, okay, we're looking good, he let me know I'm going to be dark for a little while. That doesn't mean anything other than I'm trying to take care of 35 other things that are also on my plate that need to get done. And we have to, if we know them well enough, we know I'm trusting you that you're giving me accurate information. The more vague they are about what's really going on internally, what their workload is, et cetera, then if we don't have a good idea of that, then we really haven't done an effective job. And this leads to this issue of ghosting. Because if someone comes out of a world of sales where it's the person you're speaking to has the budget, has the buying decision, authority, responsibility, et cetera, you have that conversation with them, they talk to you, they say yes, and within a week you've got a deal. These are situations that go from, could be 3 months, 6 months from the time you have the first conversation to the deal finally closes. And you have to have your antenna up to understand what is ghosting and what is just normal. You just have to accept it. This is their process. Yeah. And so you have to gather as much of that intel as you can early on and have them trust you enough to say, okay, you're just trying to understand my process, which I get it. So here, I'm going to share you with what's going on internally.
Now, do you get enough time with other players where information can be exchanged, activity can be happen?
Well, it's a mixed bag, definitely. The larger the opportunity, the more complex the sale, the bigger the company, the more likely you're going to have a point of contact, and you're going to be told very carefully, you only talk to me, because I don't want. It's no different than, I'm sure, I don't know if you had that experience in sales years ago. This big electronics company I used to do a lot of work with. I could walk the halls after a meeting, and I'd pop my head in, and, hey, how's it going? All of a sudden, oh, I'm so glad you stopped in. We got a program we need to talk about. And suddenly you're sitting down, you have another meeting. Those days are gone. Those days, the opportunity for you to stroll around, unless you're an established vendor, then it's a little different.
Sure, that's definitely true. Yeah.
But the idea of you being able to gather intel just by sitting down with someone, hey, listen, I'm working with Sue over in the other department. I haven't heard from her in a while. Oh, just don't bug her. She is buried right now. She'll come up for air probably another week or two, but it has nothing to do with the program. I talked to her over coffee the other day. So that kind of intel, which is gold, is not always available. So that's why we need to work so hard to develop relationships. But back to the core question, if the company is smaller and you're dealing with the most senior person, they don't have a problem with you talking to someone below them, and making connections there and getting to know the team. If they've pretty much said, okay, we're pretty much going to be on your side, they don't mind that. But the larger the organization, the more structured they are, they don't want you wandering around talking to other people. And that's just been my experience within my industry. That may not be universal, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, because I've always sensed that as the major problem with the complex sale. You get stuck with one person, and that's great if that person's your champions on your side, wants to work with you and communicates. That's a lot to ask.
Oh, yes.
Usually you get maybe one of those.
Right. Yes, definitely.
And, I just had a case where it was like my, key point of contact who hasn't really been a champion, but has been a customer and stuff, just went radio silent and ghosting on me. And I went around them because clearly I wasn't getting the deal. And I had a relationship with the other person, and it was all positive, and it wasn't calling anybody out or throwing anybody under the bus. I just asked a question, and it reignited the deal. And I'm sure I ruffled some feathers, but if the person that you're assigned to isn't communicating, isn't responding, and hasn't been a champion, what choice do you have?
Well, I think you put your finger on the critical issue there, which is we need to make that assessment on the sales side. Do we have nothing left to lose? Yeah. Are we in a situation where I have no other contacts in this company? This is a brand new venture. It's either going to happen or not happen. If it doesn't happen, this is a 5-year deal. I'm not going to be able to talk to them for a long time anyway. I'm really at that point where I have not gotten enough internal intel to say, is this a normal SOP that this is just the way they are? They go ghosting and all of a sudden you get the phone call, hey, you got the deal, we're moving forward, or we really don't have that. So I agree that we have to be willing to take that extra step and be willing to ruffle some feathers if we're at that point where I just need to know. Because to me, that's one of the most frustrating things in sales is that, we can take the no answer NO, but we have a hard time with no answer.
Yeah,
so we're just waiting and waiting and waiting,
Yeah, most often means we don't have, what I say is like what isn't overtly positive is covertly negative.
Right.
Because if they want to and they're going to reply sooner or later. And if you give them, hey, I'm getting the feeling that you're not going to do anything, and I just, if I don't hear from you by Friday at 5, I'll take that as a no. Some kind of acid test. And I get it. There are long dark periods, but, a month without a response is typically not a positive thing.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think that's a very smart approach because you'll uncover whether they were kind of they've already kind of made an internal decision and they're actually depending on getting started with you soon. If you send that note saying, based on, we haven't had any contact in a while, I'm assuming you moved on to another vendor, that will certainly ignite there. So, whoa, wait, hold on. Yeah. I was actually going to call you next week and we need to get started versus if that still gets no response, then you know exactly where you stand. So, and this gets back to that same issue of we have to be willing to ask the tough questions because it does no good to have a lukewarm, hot and runny sales funnel. We need to know where we stand. And it's much better to move on to someone else who's genuinely interested than just hang on indefinitely for someone who's not really showing a lot of forward motion.
Yeah, and I've never seen deliver bad news on anyone's calendar, right? It's like nobody wants to deliver bad news unless it's a sociopath, I guess. But
that is the perennial problem. I to tell you the truth, and not to get off subject, but I don't understand that. Salespeople have thick skin. We live in the land of no. And it's like baseball players. Like if we're hitting 300, we're doing pretty good. We understand that 7 times we're going to get a miss, but I don't understand that part on the buyer side. do you think that we're all these shrinking violets that we can't hear? We've decided to go someplace else. Okay, fine. You just saved me a lot of time and energy. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on.
And that's logical, but then you have the, how do I look in the stress, right? It's like,
right.
that delivering of bad news, it's like everyone just puts it off. And let's face it, some salespeople don't want to hear bad news. They always have hope and optimism, and it's a tough situation. I get that. Have you ever been able to kind of like pull an existing vendor out that they were reasonably happy with?
Yes, primarily because there are certain folks in the industry that we know we are extremely well positioned against, and we know what the shortcomings are of it's a well-established player that's been around for a long time. We know what their shortcomings are. So we've really fine-tuned our messaging and on our outbound communication and first conversation, saying, we know that these things are a problem, and it's just the way that vendor is set up. We're not denigrating them in any way. It's just how they're set up. It's the way the company is structured. These are some shortcomings based on, in comparison, what's available in the industry. We're leading the way with this new approach and this different value proposition. And when we're that direct about it, they say, it's like the elephant in the room. Like, yes, you're absolutely right. Those are shortcomings. We love them. They've been around for a long time. Great relationship. But business is business, and we can't not use the best and the brightest as far as available tools and capabilities, technology in the industry. And that's how we've been very effective. You're not going to be the David and Goliath simply by force of effort. That can work sometimes, but you have to be very specific to say, why would you change from this established vendor and take a chance? Because that's what everyone thinks. I'm taking a chance.
Of course. Yeah.
One who puts their head on the block and says, I'm going to move away from our well-established vendor we've been using for years, and I'm going in this new direction. That person's reputation is on the line as well. So when we talk to our buyer, we need to respect that their reputation is on the line when they choose to go with somebody new. So we have to speak to them in terms that reassure them, here's our capabilities, here's our reputation, here's what we've been delivering. You want testimonials? We're happy to give you testimonials. So we have to be very, very sensitive to their risk internally of making a new decision.
Yeah, because it's not just cost, because they don't get probably comped on cost savings. They get comped on, I'm sure, many different things.
Right, because in our particular case, we're involved in the IT, we're involved in all of the employee experience, we're involved in sales hitting numbers, we're involved in a lot of places, a lot of touch points in the organization. So if a program is introduced and doesn't do well, you got a lot of people that are not too happy. It's not just copier paper that is jamming in the machine. Okay, take the paper out, get some new paper, we're all set. This is now you are entrenched in that organization in many different levels, touching many different people. So in our case in particular, we have to do our job to reassure them that this will run smoothly.
And what would you say your sales superpower is?
For me personally, I pride myself in having a lot of integrity in the sense that if I say this is A, you're going to get A. If it's going to be B, you're going to get B. And I make sure I work with my team to ensure that we absolutely deliver on the promise that we've made. And I own that. So as we all know in sales, we're the face of the company. We have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, the thing I told the client, I'm confident we can deliver that and it will produce that result. So I've always made it a high priority to speak in complete clarity and honesty with my client about what we can and can't do, and be honest about the things you can't do. That's important. Not just saying, here's all the positives, but be willing to say, these are the barriers. We go from here to here. Outside of that, we'd have to bring in, a third party to help and assist. But honesty and integrity, I think, is absolutely integral in long-term sales success.
And the main ingredient in trust.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. Hey, Tom, really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to learn about your company, what you do, and connect with you?
The company is CoreCentive, and it's very simply corecentive.com. I am at T Frederick, that's FREDERICK, T Frederick at corecentive.com. And would certainly love to tell anybody about our unique approach to this industry of sales incentives, employee recognition, reward.
So yeah, I think that is key. The ability to keep the deal moving, to keep reasons for engaging with the client, all members of the client, not just that one person. We so easily get stuck with that person. And we run out of reasons to stay in contact, and these long gaps are the death of deals. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going away. They may be backburnered, or who knows. But and that's the problem. We don't know where it stands. We call it no decision. We call it waiting for approval. But we've got to have action. We've got to have a plan. We've got to work backwards from the objective that they want into all the steps to have urgency based off of their needs, not just our quarterly commission checks. Tom's a great guy. I really enjoyed talking to him. I'd like to have him back on the show. Let me know what you think. To give everybody an update on the courses, they're taking off. People are really getting the results. And there's two major ones. People are either having a hard time getting into new cold accounts, and so I created Start the Conversation, Get the Meeting. The course has been taught in person for about 6 years now, and online now for a little over a year and a quarter. So there's a good 30 hours of office hours, real-world examples, one-on-ones. So you get one-on-one coaching with me. Unlimited one-on-one coaching is included, as long as I can put the content into the course. All the office hours are put into the course, so if you can't make the time, just send in your questions either by voicemail or email. I answer them during office hours. It's a way of building community, building coaching and mentoring all in one class, and you have access to it for a full year. Last year, I kind of limited it to 6 months. I ended up opening it up to everybody who bought it early. 1 year seems to be the right amount of time because you got to change your habits. You got to change your approach. And the results that people are getting are just amazing. The other course is Closing the Complex Sale. This is like once you get that meeting, how do you prevent all the objections? How do you keep the deal moving? How do you understand how companies buy and give the people that you're talking to the ammo to sell internally? Yes, it'd be nice to meet everybody who's involved in this, but today that's less and less likely, especially if you have travel constraints. Your own business acumen may not allow you to do that. So Closing the Complex Sale shows you how to build your map, your process, understand the full game. And this is a methodology that I have worked on my entire life. I really took an engineering approach to sales because guess what? The personality wasn't carrying it. So, and I don't play golf. So I had to learn how to actually sell and how to, really get companies to take action, how to focus on the deals that will close, and how to crush your number this year. Think about what you want to do if you doubled your number, if you had another 200 or 300K in commission coming in this year. And would it be worth spending, a half hour, an hour a week becoming better? Because it's not just knowledge. It's taking your deals, pulling them apart, putting together a strategy and a plan. Too many people think it's, I just don't know something. Well, you may know it or you may not know it. It's whether you do it. Sales is a lot like comedy or a magic trick. Even though you see the trick, doesn't mean you can do the trick or do the trick in the way that it's effective and entertaining. The complex sale is not just knowing, it's having somebody help you through the process, preventing the bad things from happening and making sure the good things do happen. Also, make sure you check out the free ebook over at b2brevenue.com and check out the show notes for all the links to all the partners and supporters of the podcast. People are loving Pipe Drive. You get 60 days. I was wrong. I thought it was 30 days. Someone told me, Brian, it's 60 days. It's insane. That's 2 months. You get to use it for free with the Brutal Truth coupon code. All one word, Brutal Truth, just like the podcast. And check out the YouTube channel. I'm putting up a lot of videos, and some of the podcasts I'm going to start doing in video as well. Some people like that. You just can't get enough Burns TV. You're sitting at home, you got the new Apple TV, you put up YouTube. Let's take a look at the Brutal Truth. Who binge on it. Who needs Games of Thrones when you got this kind of content out there? Nothing but greatness. Really big thank you for everybody on LinkedIn who shares my content, likes it, put a little comment, a little bit of your 2 cents. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.